ready?
Born ready.
So according to our finance minister, Chrystia Freeland, we are in fact not experiencing a recession. Our economy's awesome. But we are experiencing a Vibecession, whatever the heck that means. We're going to unpack that. Are we really at the risk of Trump crushing our economy with 25% tariffs? We got to unpack that. Bank of Canada is lowering rates, or are they lowering rates? They're between a rock and a hard place as bond yields continue to go up.
Also, Patrick, Trump, and is the Canadian dollar going to get only worse because it's been getting hammered? Also, is the Keystone Pipeline going to be back on the table? I know you're curious about that, Mr. Alberta. And then finally, we're going to talk about Trudeau and these immigration issues. What's going to happen? You're going to find out.
Let's talk about it. Let's get going.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching. Welcome to episode number 53 of Rein It In. Get ready because it's going to be a great show.
Just a reminder, like, subscribe, put some comments in there, get those algorithms cranked up.
All right, Patrick, before we get started here, I got to talk about the issue. I have an issue. And that is, we've been asking for comments. We finally get a ton of comments on our Trump episode, which is fantastic. I think we're having a bit of our own little viral moment, which is fantastic. But someone said they don't like our sound effects. And I'm like, that's the show. The show is sound effects. So are we going to get rid of the sound effects? What do we think here?
I don't know. We can't make everybody happy as much as we want to. But listen, at the end of the day, it's all about the content, and we're going to be unpacking a lot of it today.
All right. I love the comments. So keep the comments coming. Like and subscribe. I love it, Patrick.
I think I'm the favorite.
Oh, there's no doubt. There's no doubt. Listen, there's no doubt for two reasons. Number one, you're the old bull. Everybody likes the old bull. The young bull, not so concerned. That's the first thing. Second thing is you're Mr. Doomer, Gloomer, Boomer. So everybody loves that. So as a result of that, the old bull, you got that combination. It's an irresistible combination, Patrick. That's why you're being invited to speak at TEDx and I'm not.
Let's just keep it in mind. That's what goes on. Okay, let's get to work.
All right, Patrick, I love this opening headline we talked about here, which is that Chrystia Freeland says we're not in a recession. The economy is great. We're in what you're calling, or what people are calling, a Vibecession. It's just the vibes that are bad. I can't believe she said this. I just can't believe it.
You know, it's interesting that our liberal NDP government continues to spiral downhill. They're desperate. I mean, for her as our finance minister to stand in front of a camera and deny that we are feeling the pain of inflation, the pain of an economy that is turning down, and then to say
we're not really going into a recession. It is kind of a soft landing. It's just bad vibes. We're just not feeling it.
You know, but having said all that, I listen to it as long as I can. That's really hard for me to do. But JG, this goes back to one of the things that I often shine a light on, which is in some regards, it is a bad vibe. And that is because consumer confidence continues to be challenged. Like people just aren't feeling confident. The challenge with that, of course, is as consumer confidence drops, it really is an indication that people aren't spending money. In an economy like Canada, where we are driven by consumerism, when people stop spending money, it is that downward spiral, and that is what we're bumping up against right now. So Chrystia Freeland, to the degree that she knows what the hell she's talking about, which is to no degree, ultimately, she is right about one thing. Consumer confidence is waning. It is challenged. And so is that a bad vibe? Yes. But to come out and say, our economy is
really doing great, we're not really in a recession.
To me, that's just pure gaslighting.
The really positive economic news, the fact that the Canadian economy does appear set for a soft landing, that's good news. But Canadians aren't feeling it. People have been talking about a Vibecession and how that is a challenge for the Canadian economy.
Well, I was just going to say, Patrick, it's like, as speakers, you and I have done, tens of thousands of hours of public speaking. And like, you never blame the audience. You don't stand on stage and blame the audience. I mean, you know what I mean? And that's essentially what she's done, except she does it in front of a camera and she blames the people. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy to me and makes no sense. But you are right that it gives an interesting sense of where they're at and kind of what's happening behind the scenes for them? Because for someone to get to that point, think about kind of the position they got to be in order to get to the point where they're now blaming us. I'm kind of like, wow, like you're in a really bad spot if you're going to stand in front of a camera and blame us, the people, Canadians. I find that fascinating. She must be in a tough spot. There's obviously some wrinkles behind the scenes, if you know what I mean.
Am I the villain? I don't think I'm the villain.
Well, it just really shines a light on the incompetence of our government, and that is something that we've talked about many times. The good news is that it will go away. I think that our NDP Liberal government is going to get literally crushed in an epic way going forward. That's the good news. Through all of this, I always come back to, okay, what does this mean? So fundamentally, JG, we talk about it. I mean, I get kind of teased about being the doom and gloomer boomer, but ultimately, as much as it is a tough economy and there is doom and gloom, but within it all, there is the opportunities. And that's what we have to get our listeners to shift.
That's what I was going to just about to say, Patrick, which is, listen, this isn't necessarily wrong. The market is where the market is, and you have to meet the market where it is. And yeah, definitely consumer confidence is down. Now, as a real estate investor, a sophisticated real estate investor, and especially those that are just starting out, it's really, really tough to invest against those headwinds because you want that consumer confidence. You want those sunny vibes and the rainbows and all that stuff. And I get all that because, listen, nobody wants that more than this rose-colored glasses guy. At least I'm accused of being such as Patrick. But the point is those investing in the face of this is where the greatest opportunities live, is when the consumer confidence is at its lowest, when things look to be going wrong. This is where the opportunities are. You're 100% correct, Patrick. And you and I just spent the last 3 days together, which was a ton of fun. And you and I saw some of those opportunities. We drove around, you and I drove you to these properties. I showed you these opportunities that are coming down the pipeline. I mean, you're seeing what I'm seeing, right? Rose-colored glasses or not, bro, you're seeing it.
Well, and that's the thing, right, is that to your point, we drove around and saw the opportunities, and you're very familiar with your own backyard. And that is part of the whole thing, is that you got to be dialed into what's going on. You can't be sitting on the sidelines thinking that these opportunities are going to fall in your lap. You're not. So is it harder work? Yes. Do you need to be courageous? 100%. But JG, one thing that we didn't really talk about. So as much as Stephanie and I had the opportunity to speak at a TEDx event, so fun, university students, it was just inspiring and actually gave me hope for the future when I talked to some of these kids and we saw where that was going. Like, it was awesome. But on the previous day, I spoke to a large group of professionals that are in the real estate business, and they're just in business in general. And, I laid out what I was seeing and what was happening overall, and understanding one fundamental thing is that they're looking at it and they come around and they go, man, it's so hard to be optimistic about our economy, but they also see what's going on. And really what I delivered on in that particular presentation that I did was an overarching, where is the economy today? Where do I see it going? But we all had the conversation around, as much as this is about growing wealth, JG, I cannot stress this enough. This is about wealth preservation. We'll call her our finance minister. That's what her title is. Freeland, we talk about the Canadian dollar. We talk about fiat currency being decoupled. She's decoupled. At the end of the day, we look at what's happening with our dollar. We need to get our capital placed into a store of value. Real estate is one of those stores of value. That's about wealth preservation. Can't stress it enough. And this is an opportune time.
Let's jump to what I feel like we're going to talk, especially from now until early January, mid-January, late January. We're going to talk about Trump all the friggin' time. My gosh, is it dominating the headlines. And you know what? First, before we talk about the tariffs, which is scaring the crap out of everybody right now, I want to talk about those and kind of put people's minds at ease in a sense, or at least have the discussion. But I think before we get there, it's important for people to realize, Patrick, as you and I very well know, and they also know, that this is what the media does. They are going to take every word that comes out of Trump's mouth and they're going to spin it to the advantage of getting clicks, getting eyeballs. And that means they're going to spin up bad news like crazy about all things Trump between now and, until forever, because that's just how the media is wired. The media's exists in order to get your eyeballs. And to do that, they have to spin up bad news. And my gosh, they are just doing a phenomenal job of it right now because they are scaring everybody with these damn tariffs.
Well, it is interesting, isn't it? And listen, for face value, if you just look at the headlines, 25% tariff on anything coming out of Canada into the U.S. He's suggesting that with Mexico and as well as China. Now, from my perspective, you have to lift the hood on that because, 25% tariffs, that's nuts. How can we do that? But it's conditional. And that's the key. He's actually doing what Canadians have been asking our current federal government to do for almost 4 years. Get immigration under control, because who we've got coming into this country is not who we think it is. Number one, it's out of control. They don't know what they're doing in terms of, and they don't understand who's even coming in. And that's a whole different conversation. And then he's saying, get the fentanyl and the drug issue handled. But here in Canada, we've legalized drugs. Fentanyl becomes a place, and Canada's become a place where we're manufacturing fentanyl. And so that's Trump's stand. He's saying, get the drug issue out of Canada cleaned up, get the immigration crossing borders cleaned up. And so to me, it's a conditional kind of negotiation, and the negotiation is around 25% tariff. And he's saying, get it cleaned up or you're going to pay the price for it. Now, the interesting part of that is that when you listen to the president of Mexico, I think president of Mexico is the right title for her. But anyways, ultimately, she isn't pushing back, but she's saying, okay, I understand what you're saying, but here's what Mexico has done. We've done this and this and this. And the immigration is, we're not having immigration or drug issues that you're having in the US. So all to say that she is very adept and very skilled in her negotiation, in her stand that she can take. The problem that we've got is we've literally got Trudeau and Freeland saying, let's negotiate, but they've got nothing to negotiate on. They're incompetent, and Trump knows that. So at the end of the day, what we're going to have to go through the pain of waiting for Trump to get punted, or get Trudeau get punted, and then Poilievre steps in with a plan. And I've listened to Poilievre's plan; it's pretty solid. And we have.
What is his plan, Patrick? Can you speak a couple highlights of it? Because I haven't heard that part yet.
Well, first and foremost, he's going to drop the carbon tax. That's part of his plan. Secondly, he's going to speak to the immigration issues and get immigration back under control. And again, we come back to the legalization of all the street drugs that we have. And you and I talked about this on the weekend, where in British Columbia, you can literally walk up to a vending machine and get heroin. Like it's just crazy what's going on. And many people don't even realize that. So the point of it is that Poilievre's coming in and I encourage people to listen, to don't just read the headlines, look and unpack the conversation or the statements that are being made, because they're so misleading. Some of them are outright not true. So, for example, with the immigration, Trudeau finally sits down and goes, we may have got a little get carried away. That's not his languaging, by the way, but that's how he tried to position it. It's like, yeah, we needed immigration and we turned on the taps and maybe we overdid it, so we're going to pull it back. Now, here's what's interesting about that, JG. 4.9 million immigrants into this country, their visas come due in about a year from now, some December 2025. So when asked and when pushed, okay, so what are you going to do in the visa renewal? He says, well, people will leave on their own. Literally, that's what he said. It's going to be self-regulating. No worries. Those 4.9 people are going to leave the country. We don't have to try and control it. And it's asinine. Like, it's absolutely, I don't even know where to go with the conversation. So it's all to say this. Some number of those individuals will, in fact, leave on their own because they're getting out of the country because they literally can't afford to live here. The visas will expire. But I know historically with government, they'll just change the visa status. So right now, it's much ado about nothing. It's just headlines. We can sit back and watch it. But these are issues that are coming up that we have to look at. And this goes back to Trump's 25% tariffs. We have to get immigration under control and consider who's coming into this country. Forget about the volume of people coming into this country. Who is coming into this country? What are their skills? What are they going to be in terms of a contribution to our productivity, which is absolutely in the tank? And so these are all things that are happening. And sadly, what's happening in terms of the data that's showing up is that many people that are leaving Canada are the skilled immigrants. They're going, I can't get a job here. I can't afford to live here. So we're losing skilled immigrants. Here's the problem. We'll call them the criminals, the shady side of our immigration. They're staying here. And do you know why they're staying here, JG?
Tell me.
Because their country won't take them back.
Yes.
So there's a quality of people coming into this country. These are all frustrating things. So these are topics, they're topical. We need to, unpack, lift the hood on these conversations so that we're not just reading headlines and get to what it is. To your point earlier, which I think is really important for everybody, it is what it is. We can't control certain things. We can certainly get fired up about it, ask me. But ultimately, I have to come back to, okay, what is my strategy? What is my thesis? What am I going to execute on? And that is within these market conditions, we're seeing opportunity. Wealth preservation is critical. Make no mistake, the dollar is decoupling and it will take years to happen, but we have to stay ahead of it. You can't deny that it's happening and ignore it because it will bite you in the end.
I think there's going to be an absolute plethora of these kinds of headlines regarding Trump, regarding his plans. And there's no doubt he's going to come out. He's going to do some things. They're going to be big and bold. We know that. There's no doubt about that. But I do agree, Patrick, that we need to have the right people on our side that are going to negotiate, that are going to talk, that are going to discuss. Because the pipeline is another fantastic question. It's a question a lot of people are asking us. Hey, what's going to happen with the pipeline? Is it, I believe Trump said he would sign it back into existence, right? On day one, I think that's what he said. But who knows? This may be he wants this oil. There's no doubt about that. He wants this oil. We want to sell it to him. Is this going to be part of that negotiation? That remains to be seen.
Well, there's a couple things around the pipeline that, people don't understand is that, so first off, we go ahead with the pipeline and a lot of money was spent by, these large oil companies to get this pipeline going because it was all a go. Obama came in, he shut it down. Trump comes in, gets it fired back up again. Biden comes in, shuts it down. All to say this, is that Keystone is in parts and pieces. Some of it's even been repurposed. So here's the challenge that is going to have to be dealt with. And that is, if in order to get Keystone fired up again, it's going to cost many billions of dollars and it's going to take time. So any of the oil companies that are going to be asked to do that, for example, let's repair the damage done. Let's redo what we undid and get things fired up again. But these oil companies are going, yeah, right. So it's going to take years to do that. We're going to be 4 years in and risk Trump being, or the new president coming in, or if that's a new party, whatever. And then the new president comes in and goes, yeah, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that Keystone thing, because environmentally it doesn't make sense. So I'm not optimistic about it. I think it would be awesome. And I'm excited that Trump says, yes, day one, we're going to do it. But we have to pay attention and say, okay, let's not get too excited because are they going to be able to pull it off? Not so sure. I mean, it's 850 million barrels a day once it gets fired up. So it is something that we want. It would be huge for Canada and Alberta specifically, but Canada overall for sure. But I just don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off based on what I'm seeing.
That's a good point. It's a really good point, Patrick, because even though he clears the way for it, that doesn't necessarily mean at all that someone's still got to build this thing. And I don't know, and I don't know enough about it, so maybe someone could put it in the comments, or maybe Patrick, but how long is it going to take for them to finish? Because if they could get it done in, say, a couple of years, then they have what it takes. But if it's going to be an 8 or 10 year project, then you're right. There's quite a bit of risk in there, and they've already wasted hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars. Will they do more? Who knows?
Yeah. So the window of time is definitely years, but there's two aspects to it. Number one, getting it going again, getting it put back together. I mean, some of it has been repurposed for water, for example. So there's a lot of work to be done to get it fired up. But let's just say that takes 3 or 4 years. Maybe they can get it done in 4 years and at least get something flowing through that pipeline. But then ultimately, if a new president comes in that isn't on side with it, they shut it down again. So there's a lot of risk in terms of capital. And, some of these oil companies, even the big oil companies who have deep pockets are, they're not stupid. They're not the government. They're not going to put billions into it at the risk of losing that and having it shut down again. That's part one of it. And then the second part of it is that the other risk that is happening is that we look at it and say, it's a pipeline, it gets fired up, it gets going. And yeah, let's say it gets online totally in the 4 or 5 years, but then it's an ongoing thing. And then think about the headwinds that they're going to be facing if this whole climate change and environmental and all the things that go on, if they're going to be facing those headwinds and constantly dealing with the legal ramifications of fighting fire in court, spending billions on doing that. Like I say, it's really messy, so it'll be interesting to see what happens, and we won't know anything about that until probably well into 2025. I remain hopeful, but I'm not optimistic.
Now, all of this, Patrick, is having an impact on the U.S. dollar, strengthening it, therefore weakening the Canadian dollar, so to speak. And you're kind of seeing that. I mean, just recently here, we've kind of come down. This is an interesting 1-year chart. Went as high as 76 cents on the dollar, now down to 71 cents on the dollar. So interesting. Now, this could, assuming no major tariffs, this could help our exports to the U.S. But the tariffs have an impact on that.
Well, there's a real challenge that we face. So Carolyn Rogers, the assistant director or whatever she is of Bank of Canada, I think she's awesome. I think that she should be actually, lead that way. But anyways, that's a different conversation. She said a long time ago, in case of emergency, break glass. It's time to break glass. That's all about productivity and how Canada isn't productive. So that's one part of her conversation. Secondly, in an interview that she sat down with, we look at this and what do we do? So the Bank of Canada only has control over variable rates. They set their rate. They don't have any control over, of course, the bond yields. And bond yields are on the rise. So fixed rates are going up. We need, and people want, the variable rate to come down. But there's a challenge with all of that because, oh man, it gets so convoluted. Now we have the HST, GST break, which is going to cost billions of dollars, number one, but arguably it's going to put more capital into the market, which will in fact create some inflation. Now the Bank of Canada looks at what's going on economically and says, can we lower rates? We're at risk of creating inflation. So we start to look and say, are they going to lower rates in December? Before it was pretty much a lock-in in most people's opinion that it was going to be 50 basis points. That's not going to happen now. So we most believe. I don't know what's going to happen, to be honest with you, because here's the other side of that issue, which is something Carolyn Rogers also said, is we know that if they lower rates, it will in fact weaken the Canadian dollar. Her comment was straight up, we have room to do that. Like, they will sacrifice the Canadian dollar because here's where they're between a rock and a hard place. If they leave rates where they are, real estate will continue to be slow. The economy will continue to be slow. And so we suffer economically. But if they lower rates, then we have another issue, which is that the Canadian dollar gets weaker against the US dollar. A lot of our goods come out of the US, which means that we're paying more for it. So then we have inflation on that side of the equation because of the weak dollar, given that we're bringing in US goods. So they are literally between a rock and a hard place. I don't know what they're going to do. I doubt if they know what they're going to do. They're always looking at data, but it gets really complex. And this $250 or whatever it translates to, I know it's like almost insulting to think that this, and what they gave us a GST, HST break on is like crazy. Like, don't even get me going. But the point is this. It's going to literally bring more capital, liquidity into the market, which will, in fact, impact inflation. And that's why the Bank of Canada is going, I don't know if we'll be lowering rates 50 basis points because of what the move was that our Trudeau government trying to buy votes, HST, GST.
That's what I was going to say. That's exactly what this is. This is just like this is a vote grabbing tactic. And it's interesting because you talk to the average person and they know that's what's happening. They're like, oh yeah, there you go. He's just trying to buy our votes again. It's just so transparent.
Yes. So these are the things that we have to look at. So what does this mean for us? Again, is that with an uncertain economy comes a lot of different opportunities. But again, you have to get out, look for them, make sure you got the right people on your team. I am so right now in my view of the world. This is not investing or financial advice. We cannot afford to keep our money in a bank. And so, yes, you need some liquidity, but at the end of the day, we are losing buying power quickly. And, I use that example. If you got 100 grand in the bank, in 12 months from now, you're about $85,000 of buying power. And so this is about wealth and capital preservation. Fiat currency is definitely decoupling. We don't know the speed of which it will decouple, but we have to keep our money working. So for those of you who are really understanding some of these dynamics, look at the opportunities that real estate is presenting, get into those hard assets, and invest your capital. That's really it. Take advantage of the opportunities. Don't get shut down by this and let the whole fear-mongering headlines shut you down.
Now, the bond yields, as you point out on this chart, though, Patrick, in the last month, I mean, it was in the roughly 3%, let's say, a month ago when the elections happened. And it's been on a bit of a run up, but it's been coming down since the highs. Like the highs were about November 21, 22 or something like that. It's come down quite a bit. It's come from 3.3 to under 3.1. So interesting. My point is, are you thinking this goes straight up from here?
Well, I think that there's a risk of that for sure. I think that it's going to increase. Don't forget, bond yields are an indication of the lack of confidence of what's going on in the economy overall. So when we look at bond yields and look how volatile they are, that's how uncertain things are economically right now. So, I think for us, we start to realize that we may get lucky and be able to renew some mortgages in 2025 in, the high threes, low fours, but I'm not optimistic about that. I think we're going to end up taking variable rates. Maybe December, I'm going to call a quarter basis point. I don't know if it's going to be more. I mean, as a real estate investor, it'd be nice if it was 50 basis points again, but that is going to create an inflationary environment again. And when we look at inflation, JG, let's just unpack that quickly. Our inflation is less than 2% when you take off, by the way, the cost of interest payments on a mortgage, which is part of CPI. You remove that, and guess what? We're well under 2%. So the Bank of Canada goes, okay, we can lower rates. But in the meantime, our federal government, in their genius, give us a tax break, which then is an inflationary move. Bond yields go up, which is going to literally weaken the Canadian dollar, or if they lower rates, the Canadian dollar is going to get weaker, which is also going to inflate. It's like a no-win situation. And so it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next 45 days.
So listen to this. I had a mortgage renewing, two of them, commercials that were renewing. They're renewing in 3 days, end of this month. So at the beginning of the month, 3 days before the election, I checked with them. I said, hey, what's your rates right now? Right. And I wanted to see if I would drop, right? Because I knew if they gave me the rates and I would probably be able to at least get that for sure. Which, by the way, the rate is down 1.5 or 1.7% from what I'm currently paying, because I renewed last year and I only went for 1 year. So I'm still coming down 1.7. So listen, I'm happy about that. But since that day, which was November 6th, I asked them for their rates. Since that day, I just negotiating with them this morning, rates are up 0.15 basis points. So I'm like, shoot. So anyways, I went back to them and said, guys, can I at least have the rate you published to me? And they allowed it, which is fantastic and good for that. But that my point is, Patrick, is bad timing, but it's already having an impact. If you have to renew a mortgage this month or this month or next month, this little blip could have an impact on you.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. And when we look at, again, we have to look at the global macro. We have to consider the fact that, Russia, Iran, Ukraine, Middle East, it's all ramping up. And so that is driving some huge uncertainty into the market. Once a war gets going, or escalates even more, they will literally flood the system with more liquidity, more cash that will drive inflation. So, we don't like inflation as consumers, but believe it or not, that inflation is also going to drive asset prices, real estate being one of those assets, those hard assets. We're seeing it with gold. We're seeing it with Bitcoin. We're seeing it with art. We're seeing it with watches. This is why the rich get richer, JG. And, people, it's because the wealthy own assets. And assets go and they ride the wave called inflation. That's the way of the world. This is baked into the system. So, at the end of the day, our dollar's decoupling and everything is inflating. Assets are going to continue to rise. And yes, there'll be some pullbacks. We look at real estate and what's going on. We know that the condo market in Toronto, for example, we've said it many times, it's literally melting down. 91-year lows of sales over the past, like 91% down from over 10-year time frame. And you look at it and it's just melting down. But here's the other side of that coin, is that they're not building more because the math doesn't work. The costs, the zoning, the taxes, all of those things, well over 30%. So developers are on hold. They're not putting new products. So right now it's like, oh, we got a glut of condos coming on the market. Even if our immigration tap gets turned off, in 2-3 years from now, we're going to see a shortage of living space and even in condos in that Toronto market. So these are all, it's really messy, but we have to look into the future and see what's going on. I don't know where else to go with that conversation.
Well, interesting.
But also, real estate goes up.
Patrick, for us investors, and I've been saying for some time, there's a lot of good trades out there. It's a great time to be building, renovating, as we're doing a lot of. But a couple stories that, Patrick, I know you'll be able to relate to. We had local construction company here in Peterborough, pretty big, typically has a team of 40. Good crew, good team, great reputation. Well, I was shopping around for a new truck recently, and I thought to myself, oh, that's interesting. They're selling a couple of their trucks, like right in front of their office. So I called them, asked them, say, oh yeah, they're selling a bunch of their trucks, a bunch of their trailer. They've went from a team of 40 to a team of 15 because of the lack of construction that they're seeing. And then there's another builder who's a subdivision kind of developer. And this particular person, I picked up a bunch of his employees, and they haven't started a new project in 2 years. But let's tie this back to the conversation, Patrick, that we started with, which is confidence. All of this stuff gets people nervous, gives the country a bad vibe, as Chrystia Freeland puts it. But the fact is that if you're an investor and if you can act in spite of that, and if you can have, instead of having confidence in it, you can have confidence in yourself, there's definitely some great deals to be had and some great opportunities out there, phenomenal opportunities. But you're going to have to be stronger willed than usual, no doubt about it.
Well, you have to be really strategic, and that's ultimately it. Listen, even within the REIN community, we're seeing the do-it-yourself investors shut down. It's too hard. It's too expensive. I can't get cash flow unless you're really, really focused on some specific regions. But ultimately, this is the challenge that many are going to face in the future, which is, okay, we don't own those assets. They think prices are going to come down way more. Right now, even given what's going on, yes, it's gotten softer, but even by our chart here of the condo market and some of the housing in Toronto GTA area, we're seeing it pull back from all-time highs. So is that the benchmark you want to compare to? And we're seeing it coming back into those 2020, 2021 price points. And so is that a market crash? If you compare it to a high, it looks like it, but the trend is still up. That's the key kind of note to make here.
Yeah, let's also be very clear. Condos aside, because condos are at their late 2021 prices right now, but single family is at the 2022 prices right now. It's not even close to 2020 prices.
No, that's the point. So the thing is, the trend continues to be up. So it's a lower high. That would be the best way to describe that. It just coming off its its peak, and then it comes to a new lower or a new high low. You know what I'm saying? So it's still trending up at the end of the day, and that's going to continue. And yeah, there'll be blips along the way, and it depends on region and all the things that we talk about. But ultimately, that's what's going on, and that's what we have to pay attention to. And regardless of what our government is saying in terms of we're going to drain the immigration swamp, 4.9 million immigrants are going to just go back home. That is not going to happen. And even the non-permanent residents that they have, they're going to play the game called let's just change their visa from non-permanent resident to resident. It's just all a game. So will immigration come back? Probably a little bit, but not in a meaningful way. We don't even have housing for the people that are living in this country right now. So unless we're literally going to see a huge exodus of people from Canada, and yeah, we're seeing some people leave, but it's not huge by the numbers, and we still don't have the housing to accommodate the people that are living here. So, again, we look at what real estate is doing. We have to get underneath it and stop reading the headlines, and don't be doom and gloomer. That's it. So JG, let's bring this conversation home. Again, we covered a lot of ground today. It isn't doom and gloom or boomer, by the way. We have lots of opportunities. You do have to look for them. I can't say enough. Stay on top of what's going economically. You can make these decisions and execute on a plan. Create a thesis, then do it.
Get her done.
If you enjoyed this episode and you want to hear more of what JG and I have got, check out our last episode. It was epic.